Welcome to the Adventures Club. We're here for another of our Thursday night interviews. Tonight we have as our guest Sandi Hemmerlein, who's going to talk a little bit about finding adventure in your own backyard. A little bit different topics than we normally have, but we want to talk about kind of finding things in your own space and not having to go too far or spend too much to have some adventure out there, different experience. So Sandi, welcome.
Thank you, Ken.
We've known each other for a few years now. We met through the Los Angeles Breakfast Club, which I'll just put in a little plug. If you guys haven't been there, that's another club you should check out. Great bunch of people, a lot of fun, Wednesday mornings. So Sandi, during that time, one of the things that I've noticed is you have a constant feed going. Whether it's Facebook, Instagram, blog, there's always something going on in your life. And I think a lot of us are jealous that we're sitting at work and seeing you doing cool things. But your work is doing cool things. So
very much so. Now it is. That's not always been true.
Yes. So you have been, you run your own blog, Avoiding Regret.
Avoidingregret.com.
You were a field agent for Atlas Obscura.
Yes, and still contribute to the website and still work with them in some capacity, although COVID has really gotten in the way of a lot of, in-person experiences. But
okay. And you write for KCET.
Yes, the SoCal Wanderer column, which is all about travel throughout Southern California.
So those of you, particularly in Southern California, pay close attention because you're going to hear about some really fun stuff to do tonight. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You're not a California native.
I'm not. No. And in fact, it's been almost 10 years this month, 10 years since I moved to LA. I've been in the same apartment all 10 years. It's almost getting to the point where, another 4 years I will have been here just as long as I was in New York City for, a long time, 14 years after I graduated from college in upstate New York. I think I've always had this sense of adventure and this feeling of like, I want to fall upon the thorns of life and bleed, whatever that means. But I grew up in a very strict household where I wasn't allowed to even do like normal teenager things. So it always felt like I was like staring out of the kitchen window, like wondering like what's going on out there.
There are other living beings out there.
Like, what do people do out there? Going away to college and then moving to New York City after college, the forms of rebellion or the backlash that I experienced from that sheltered childhood meant more like nightlife. It was, I was working in the music industry and marketing and going to concerts and nightclubs and partying all night long. And that really, infringes on your daytime ability to like go anywhere and do anything. So
you have to have priorities.
Yes, right. It's really one or the other. You cannot do both. But the tide changed for me a little bit in New York. I would say starting in like 2006, there was a program called Open House New York. And it was one weekend a year. It's actually still happening. One weekend a year where like places that are not usually open to the public throw open their doors and they welcome the public. So it was like, oh my God, like I get to go on this abandoned railway or climb the tower of some library or just, go to like the first municipal airport that's located way out in Brooklyn. Like this really kind of triggered something inside of me. And so the last few years that I lived in New York, I started doing more of these like local explorations, although in New York, it's very hard to get around. If you don't have a car and you're living in the 5 boroughs, you're really limited to like, it takes hours to get like not very far away. So,
and probably some small fortune in taxi.
Yeah. Right. Or just like, understanding the train schedules, and there's always some problem. You end up somewhere you weren't meant to go. And, but my job working in entertainment brought me out to California because obviously LA is a destination for entertainment. So I would have to come out here for work occasionally. And the more I started coming, the more I started to be really curious about like, what's the story with this place? Because it's not just Hollywood. And, renting cars to be at a conference or whatever, I'd be like, well, let me spend the weekend, a few extra days and drive out to, a national park or something like that. So, I had a conference in Vegas in 2007 or 8, something like that. And I decided to go to Death Valley, like for the weekend afterwards. And my New York friends were like, are you insane? Like, do you have a death wish?
Well, obviously it turned out well because you're still here.
And that was, I would say a watershed moment for me. But just having that, the freedom of having a car. So by the time that I, started to spend any significant period of time out in California or, 10 years ago when I moved here, just the fact that I had a car and I could go anywhere I wanted was just like so exciting to me. And driving anywhere was really an adventure. So, yeah, that's kind of the whole idea behind avoiding regret as well is, like making up for lost opportunities or wasted time where, it wasn't really my own fault that all that time was wasted for the first, 18 years of my life. But I still feel like I'm making up for, the things that I didn't do. And of course, I've overcompensated. Yes. I've gone way above and beyond like anything I would have missed out on as a teenager.
Well, I think a lot of people look back and say, gee, if I'd only taken it when I could have. And so I find what you do very inspiring, that more people should be doing it, frankly.
And when I first came out here, I wasn't. It definitely felt like one of these live every moment as though it's your last. I was just like, let me pile on all the experiences I can, and there was an advantage. The reason I came to LA was actually to work at a .com. I was recruited to a new position. I was relocated. I was paid to move to LA. And that job only lasted 3 months. So in my exit interview, all I could say really was like, well, thanks for the free trip to California. Yeah. And like, what do I do with my time now? And that actually has happened to me a couple of times where I've had a job that's very exciting. It's in the digital world. And then it just, goes bust after a couple months. And then I have these extended periods of time not working a day job where it's like, okay, what do I do? Let me drive somewhere and find something interesting. Let me go on a hike or whatever. So, when you said like people are working during the day watching, all of my posts, it's a lot of those things like from earlier in my time in LA were terrible times of unemployment. So I just really made the most of my unemployed time. But now, for the first time in my career, I'm a full-time writer. So I have a day job. It's in writing, but it's writing like health and wellness articles for a publishing company in Baltimore. And then, my blog obviously is very important to me. And then that really helps feed into the work that I've done for Atlas Obscura and for KCET. Okay. So, and avoiding regret is sort of like, it's almost like a travel log companion for all the ups and downs, both personally and professionally. And sometimes what I write about is purely a report. Here's the history, here's what it means. And then sometimes it's much more focused on my feelings. And because it's a personal blog, I feel like that's okay to do. So, but, I was just going to say that like the overcompensating, the first time having a car, and that was very exciting. But then I thought, well, what else can I do? Let me go drive a race car.
So no in between. You just made that leap to the whole nother level.
Yes, exactly. Right. In fact, the first time I ever drove stick shift was in a Formula One racer.
Oh, that's an interesting learning experience. I'll bet.
And, I didn't really know what I was getting into. Like, I knew that I wanted to drive a race car, but the place that I chose, I didn't really realize what kind of car it was going to be. And I wanted the driving experience, but I'm not like a spectator of car racing. So I haven't been to like a NASCAR race. I wasn't a fan of Formula One. So when I got there, it was like,
Yeah.
what do I do with this thing? And I didn't admit to them that I had never driven stick before. I was in, like the cockpit, the driver's side with the helmet on, everything. And I was just like, I'm not that good at manual.
Yeah.
So, if you have any tips, and the instructor or whoever the guy was that was in charge of like getting the driver set up was like, okay. And he kind of gave me a quick little tutorial about like an H formation of the gear shift. And, I'm kind of doing what he's telling me to do. And he was like, what are you talking about? You know what you're doing. You can do this. And I said, well, I played a lot of pole position as a child, like the Atari, arcade driving game. And he said, that's perfect. Use that experience. That's exactly what this is like.
Oh, funny. So this is a full-size oval track, I presume?
So Formula One actually is different than NASCAR, because the tracks have like these S curves and like loop-de-loops. And so the raceway that I was at was Willow Springs. It's actually a really historic raceway from like the 50s in a town called Rosamond, which is near the town of Mojave, in the Mojave Desert. And yeah, you are constantly shifting. It's not just like once you get into fourth gear, you can just like go around. Yeah. Every time you go around these hairpin turns, up hills, down hills, it's really only the straightaways that you can drive in like fourth gear, if you can even get up to that. Like, I think I was only like maximum third gear.
Yeah.
But they were a little nervous, and I did spin out and stall out.
Well, that's what insurance is for.
Yes. And, they said, just don't wreck our car.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So if you spin out, like there was a huge cascade of like pebbles and gravel that came into the car. And when that happens, they come and they check your tires, they check your helmet, they make sure you're like good to go. And then they help you restart the car if it's still stalled. And then they send you on your way. And of course, there are other drivers on the track at the same time that you're like supposedly, changing lanes with or avoiding, So I'm going around, and the next time I hit that same curve, I spin out again and I stall out again. But I was just quick enough to be able to like get myself going. And I look up and I thought, oh man, they're going to take me off the track. Like I was waiting for like the red flag or whatever. But all I see is this green flag that's just like, go, go, go. So, I managed to finish the course. And I kind of can't believe it, like that I'm even doing it. This was like so foreign to me. And because I had not been prepared for what I was in for. But by the time I finished, the same guy who had taught me the H formation said, well, for doing bad, you did really good. I was like, thanks. I did. And he said, anybody else probably would have said, get her out of there. Yeah. And that's me with the Formula One. So this very low cars with very pointy ends. They have tiny steering wheels that are like maybe the size of a dinner plate or like a salad plate. You're very cramped in there. It feels more like an airplane than
there's no lounging in those cars.
No. And he said anybody else would have said get her out of there, but he said I wanted to see what you were going to do next.
Okay, so you went from driving around the streets for pretty much first time to Formula One. Now you've gone in some other directions as well, right, with driving? Because it'd be boring to just do one thing.
Right, exactly. Well, plus I hadn't realized that Formula One was even a thing. So I still had it in my head that I wanted to like stock car, like race car driving, like what I had maybe seen in movies or whatever. So, and I had my license since I was 17, but my parents never let me have a car. They didn't let me drive their car. So I had kind of limited driving experience before I moved here. Some traveling for work in rental cars, but certainly not. I had not been training for Formula One in any capacity. No. But that you can, they have these like sort of traveling schools that you can get even like Groupons for, where you have 10 laps in a race car or something like that. So I went to both the Speedway at Fontana and after Formula One, stock car racing feels kind of boring because it's just like an oval.
Yeah, you're driving
just, and you kind of maybe can downshift when you're on the curve and then shift back up for the straightaway. But man, I understand why people love Formula One, both driving it and watching it, because it's very exciting and there's a lot going on. I got kicked off the racetrack at Irwindale.
And why was that?
Still mad about it. I think I was gypped. I actually went with a friend, who had seen that I had been to Fontana, and he was like, I want to go with you. So it was a different school, it was different people I hadn't dealt with before. It's a small track. And, they you have an earpiece. Yeah. That's one way. So they talk to you, but you can't talk back to them. There's no feedback. So they tell you what to do and you have to do it. And if you don't do it, they kick you off the track.
Very autocratic.
Right, which is necessary for safety. Yes. I mean, these are, deadly weapons, the cars. So, but anyway, they call you by your number, your car number, and they had been calling me by the wrong number. And then they had told the car in front of me to move to the right so that I could pass them. But the car in front of me was like taking its time. He was my friend and he was very nervous. So instead of like immediately moving over, and you're going pretty fast, so you can change lanes pretty fast, he paused a little bit. But I was starting to sort of speed up because they had told me to like get ready to pass him. And then they just started saying, not yet, not yet, not yet, yet, not yet. And my friend thought that was for him.
So he...
And then I was still like kind of going to get ready to pass him, not realizing that and not even knowing who they were talking to because they didn't say a car number. And when they had referred to me before, it was with the wrong car number. So anyway, I kept going when they said not yet, which was meant for me, but I did not know that. Yep. And they kicked me out and I cried because I thought it was very unfair and embarrassing.
So what kind of speeds do they let you get up to on those?
Oh, geez. In Formula One, it's really hard to get. I mean, maybe I was at 100, but with the stalling and everything, not so much. Yeah, I mean, maybe you would think, 120 plus, but you don't really have the opportunity, particularly because they're like at Fontana and Irwindale, they're choreographing it. So they're not really letting you really race the other drivers, which is what I want to do. Well, and every time I've gone to a demolition derby, I'm like, that's what I should be doing.
Well, still, all in all, 100 miles an hour is more than most people will do.
It's more than what I get up to on, the 10. So even on that stretch outside of Palm Springs that, the speed limit's 70, you can't go much past 75 on there.
So you don't just limit your driving to pavement. You had some ATV and dirt road experience. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, unfortunately, ATV experience not in an ATV.
Oh.
So I had in 2009, I had spent about a month in Joshua Tree. And I was staying at a bed and breakfast that like closes down for the summer. So I had stayed there earlier in the year. I'd made friends with the owner. She invited me to come back. And then again in 2012, she was going to be traveling over the summer. She said, "You want to come back and like basically house sit for me?" And I said, "Okay." But that summer, the summer of 2012, I just was so stressed out from all the monsoons, and every time it would rain, the power would go out. And it was a little later in the season than what I had spent there before. So it was really hot all the time. It gets to be about 110 in Joshua Tree, even though it's a high desert. And so I was just looking to escape. And I had spent some time in like, Palm Springs hotel pools and things like that. But I was looking for something else. So I decided to drive to Big Bear from Joshua Tree. And all the locals had been telling me that there's this way to go to Joshua Tree that's like through Pioneer Town on like Rimrock Ranch Road. You can take like a sort of 4-lane highway up Old Woman Springs Road down through Lucerne Valley. It's kind of a boring ride, and I'd done it several times before. So I thought, let me try something new. Not really realizing that all these locals who are telling me about this other way on Rimrock have like trucks and SUVs and 4-wheel drive vehicles, not a Honda Fit, which is the equivalent of like kicking a tin can down the road. So I kind of, my GPS did not want me to go that way at first. And I ignored it. And and just the farther I went, the more I was like, well, I've made it this far. I don't want to turn back. It was kind of a harrowing drive until I realized I was in the middle of like the San Bernardino forest. And the roads stopped having names.
Yes.
They only had like code names with numbers and letters.
Yes. That the Ranger Service and the fire department know, but not you.
Yes, and apparently ATV drivers, because the road had been really bumpy. I mean, this is one of those situations where it's like when your heart tells you to turn back, just turn back. There's no shame in that. But I kept thinking that I shouldn't be scared. I was still sort of training myself to like be alone out in the frontier of California. So I didn't turn back because it was like, I'll white knuckle it, but I'm going to be brave and I'm going to continue forth, which I should not have done. So I had a bike. You can see in that photo, there's a bike on a bike rack on the back of my car. And I had been bumping up and down so much on this bumpy, like not paved, basically ATV road that it was really loose. So I stopped my car. I left the engine running because I was afraid it wasn't going to turn back on. And I was like fiddling with the bike just to get it more sturdy on there. And a pack of maybe like 6 ATVs pulled up and they're like, "How'd you get out here?" And I was like, and I told them my story similarly as to what I've told you just now. And one of them was like, "Here's my business card. Call me and let me know that you got out okay."
You're alive.
And they had a paper map. And so they showed me where I was. And they were like, "It looks like if you stay on this thing, you'll get to a staging area. And then there's this road and you could just go right out." So I had a sense of where I was, and they didn't seem too terribly worried about me. So I just kept going. At this point, there was just no way to turn back. And I got to the area that they described to me as a ATV staging area, and there were 2 options. My GPS was telling me one way, and Google Maps both. And then there was this other way, which I started to kind of go down. It just didn't seem right. Like it didn't seem like I'd be able to make it. But the way that my GPS wanted me to go is a road called Cactus Road. It had a name, so I thought it would be okay.
You're getting closer to civilization.
Yes, right. When it stops like using the number and letter codes. And I tried driving up it, and it was very steep, and it had not been graded in a long time. It was not paved, or maybe it was paved like 100 years ago. Rocky, there were, pits, and I thought I can make this. So the more I tried to drive up, the more it was like, I can't do this. So I decided to abandon ship and go back down, but it was only wide enough for one car. So I would have to reverse my way back down this really steep road. And that car model did not have a rear camera screen. So it was, I didn't know what I was running over behind me. And my nerves were just frayed completely. So I tried to make a 3-point turn to turn around and at least face down,
Yes.
so I could see where I was going. And I just got completely caught in a rut. My front tire was just immersed in a rut. And I was very close to the top. Like I was really close to the main road that's like in Big Bear. But I had to like strap on my sneakers, walk up to the main road, try to call AAA. AAA was not going to come to my location.
They call those recovery vehicles.
Yeah. So I met like this dirt biker who was saying, well, I could drive back home and get my dad, and he's got a tow line. And then we were attracting like a crowd. There were like other people pulling over, being like, what's going on? Can we help? And finally somebody had the phone number of like one of these, off-road Jeep rescue, where they put a strap around my front tire and and I made them drive it out. Like they thought I was going to drive it out of there. No way. Once they got it out of the rut in the proper position, I made one of the guys drive me out, and I was like leaking fluid, and it was bad. I had punched I had driven over like a boulder, essentially like a big rock, and it punched an indentation in the floor, the backseat floor. So you could see where I like,
that's a big rock. But it makes for a good story.
So a good life lesson. But prior to that, I had taken that Honda Fit in Titus Canyon, which is a slot canyon in Death Valley that you can drive through. And that's a 4-wheel recommended, but not 4-wheel drive required. So I had tried it, and I had, gotten overconfident as a result of surviving Titus Canyon. But Cactus Road will go down. I mean, there are people who will anytime they talk to me or see me, they'll be like, hey, so have you gotten your car stuck anywhere lately? So that's, you wouldn't think of Big Bear as being that adventurous, but sure was for me.
So you've tried out a lot of different places and types of vehicles to drive. You got bored with that.
Well, not bored necessarily. I'm always actually looking for like some vehicular adventure. Sometimes that means somebody else is driving me. Last September, obviously not in 2020, but in 2019, I participated in like a historical reenactment stagecoach ride outside of Anza Borrego Desert State Park in a town called Warner Springs, which is really very historic and was on the stagecoach route. And there's a historic ranch house there. And every September, you can like buy a ticket to ride the stagecoach. I would like to go back because I was inside the coach this last time that I did it, but I want to ride the top, and they'll let you ride it if you can climb up there. Okay. But they won't let you take pictures because you need both hands to hold on.
Yes.
So maybe I'll get a GoPro or something and like shoot video. But my first time there, I really wanted to be able to snap photos. So I chose the cushy seat inside.
So you decided to go fly.
Sure. Right.
So
why stay on the
ground?
Tell us
about some of those experiences.
I mean, I kind of had this attitude of like, well, why not? What is it? Okay. Like literally like, let's take a flying leap. Because I had been so protected, I honestly had no sense of how dangerous the world could possibly be because, like my parents, or particularly my mother, thought everything was incredibly dangerous. So I didn't have this scale in my head. It was like, it was a level playing field. Like crossing the street in New York City is probably just as dangerous as like jumping off a cliff. Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the first things I did was parasailing. And there's a great place to do that in La Jolla, in northern San Diego County. It's the Torrey Pines Glider Port. And it's just north of the, there's a Torrey Pines State Park has a bunch of different trails through the bluffs and stuff. And so it's sort of between that and like the Torrey Pines golf course. And unfortunately, I don't have any photos of me in the paraglider, although spectating there is actually fantastic. It's the most scenic place. And they have a cute little dog there, although I'm not sure if he's still there. But just watching people do this. And some people like, have their own equipment, their own hang gliders, and they'll go out on their own. Of course, me being a novice, I had to have an instructor with me and we did tandem.
Sure.
And essentially, I was like sitting in this guy's lap. I mean, there's like a little seat
Yeah.
that you're hooked up to, and then there's the parachute. But once again, it's sort of better that I didn't know what I was in for because, we kind of walked to the edge, and this is right by the ocean. And he says, "Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to run a little bit until the ground runs out."
Okay. So this is off a cliff, not a gradual hill.
Off a cliff.
Okay.
And the one good thing is that the wind has to be just right because they will not let you go if the wind conditions are not ideal. In fact, when I went that first time, I had gone the day before and I waited hours and they sent me home because they couldn't have anybody go. So I went back the next day. But yeah, I would much rather do paragliding than like skydiving, which I did for my 30th birthday back east over the Poconos. Because skydiving is far less scenic. You like jump out of a plane and you have this like free fall where it's it's very hard to focus on like what's going on and you can't see that much. And it's not until they open the parachute and you're sort of, gliding down that it gets to be really nice. So paragliding is just all that nice part of skydiving. So, they go over the golf course and right below the glider port is like a nude beach. So we're like,
wait, can I get the address for this place? So
yeah, look for Black's Beach in La Jolla. And, I guess as part of the package that you get, they're like, oh, so do you want to take the controls for a minute? And so you get to like, pull one thing. If you pull down, you go higher. If you let it go up, you come down. It's, you're really steering this thing.
Interesting.
And it's another form of driving in my mind. Yeah. Only your feet are dangling and, the drop is a little scary. But then, now I'm just like, wherever I go, it's like, okay, there's a roadside sign saying, come fly a sailplane. I'm like, okay, sure. How much is it? Okay, I got the money. Let's do it. So again, in Warner Springs, that town I mentioned with the stagecoach, they have these sailplanes, which are like non-motorized planes that they get towed up by another plane and then they release the tow line. And it's basically how the rudders are positioned. And if you catch the wind the right way, you're over this fantastic landscape. I mean, it's the most scenic thing ever. And they have, fortunately, that's not like a person on the wing. That's just a wing mounted camera. But I have a whole series of photos of the entire ride. And again, the main pilot let me take the controls for a few minutes. And there's another photo, I'm not sure if I loaded it up for you guys, where the pilot is looking at the camera and puts his hand over his face in response to my piloting. But he said I did a good job. So
yeah, we have a member who's a glider instructor.
Okay.
It might be in that same area.
Yeah, I've never been very interested in like becoming like a get a Cessna, and have my own plane or take pilot lessons or whatever. But there was something incredibly calm about this like non-motorized plane. And that's a relatively remote area, and there's it's sort of like a burgeoning wine country. There's a bunch of wineries around there, and it's a very off the radar kind of vacation place. So I had stayed at the Warner Springs Ranch, which is an old stagecoach stop. And that's one of the early trips that I took when I first moved to California, and it really blew my mind. So, but now I'm just like, it's not only just traveling, like where can I go, but what's an unusual way that I can get there? If I can get somewhere by train, I try to do it. Because it's so different than like being, stuck on the freeway in traffic. Because I love driving, but I hate being stuck in traffic. I want to actually be driving. So there was one trip that I took on a Pullman sleeper car that left from Union Station and went to the Santa Fe Depot in San Diego. And then you had the day to like explore San Diego on foot or take the trolley or whatever. And then we came and slept on the sleeper car, parked on the tracks at the train station at night. And then we would have the next day to explore San Diego again, and then, take the train back. And it's 2-3 hours. It's one of the most beautiful train rides because it just runs right along the ocean the whole time.
Sure. Yeah, we've had another group we were with. We had the opportunity to take some of the old Art Deco cars.
Yeah.
They hook up a pair of them and run them either up to Santa Barbara or San Diego.
Yeah.
And great experience sitting in those old cars and just watching the scenery go by and having a drink, and very relaxing.
And what a throwback, because I know that Amtrak still has sleeper cars, but it just does not have the amenities that
not quite the same.
And to be able to be in my own little roomette, and the one thing I wished is that like the sleeping happened while the train was moving, because that motion puts me right to sleep anyway. So, but this was done by LA Rail, which I think does some other train excursions also up to Santa Barbara. And they keep their vintage rolling stock parked actually at Union Station.
Yeah.
So, and then the another train experience that I had, this was more recently, was sitting in the cab, with the conductor and being able to like blow the whistle.
Oh, how fun.
So I feel like that is something that like maybe 12-year-old boys like get to do now, and that like I never had the chance to do. And I'm like all for it. I am here for it. So in fact, like that on that particular train excursion, that's the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum, and their main facility is in Campo, California, which is almost at the border, at the Mexican border. It's right across from Tecate. And like there was like a family with a young boy that tried to buy a ticket for the cab ride, and I had already bought my ticket. And it was like, sorry, suckers.
Later when you grow up and can appreciate it.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, there is something to be, there are things that my family did do. I mean, there are some vacations that we took. I know that we went to Niagara Falls, but I was like 5 at the time. I really don't remember it. So, there's something to be said for being an adult, understanding the places that I'm going, being able to take my own pictures and shoot my own video. And then honestly, the process of writing about it really solidifies the memory, because I feel like I have done so much that it could all be a blur.
Yes.
But the fact that I've been documenting it so carefully, I have this amazing catalog of photos that is just, on a laptop, but also, in portfolio form on my website on avoidingregret.com.
So tell me about different bodies of water. Because to me, that's a whole different tack.
It is. Yeah. And I, the one thing I did not mention is that I get motion sick. I'm afraid of heights, and I get seasick. So what am I doing? Why is this fun? I do not know.
So are you on a lot of medication when you're doing this?
No, actually I have, they make these things called C-bands. They're like, like workout bands, but they have like a little plastic nodule that hits an acupressure point for nausea.
And it works.
So yeah, they work incredible. Because I would take Dramamine when I was younger, and it would make me very sleepy. And what's the point of that? Because you can't enjoy whatever you're doing. But these C bands, I mean, you can get them at like Rite Aid, any drugstore in the pharmacy department. I can wear them on roller coasters and not get sick.
Wow.
Which is saying a lot. So,
because I've seen, you see them and you go, is that for real? But
right.
We have a direct experience with them.
Testimonial, because I'm a very delicate flower, and those things give me like superpowers. So.
Good to know.
Yeah, but I will say that I don't have a lot of desire to go sailboating. Yeah. I have a friend with a sailboat, and I got pretty seasick on his boat, and I didn't have a good time. But I do love the more, like the equivalent of paragliding, but on the water. So like a gentle meander. Kayaking is great for that. Yeah. Canoeing is great. But, I'm not happy with just kayaking like wherever. Of course, I've got to go in the waters that people are like afraid of. Mm-hmm. So when the LA River opened up for summertime recreation, this was like my dream come true, because I had been so fascinated by the LA River, since before I moved here, having driven through Burbank and seeing the signs for it and just being like, what is it? So, and surprisingly, it's quite adventurous to kayak certain parts of it. So this photo is near Elysian Valley, so one of the soft bottom areas of the river. At one point, it had a concrete bottom, but it literally has rapids, and it's like washed away chunks of concrete. And there are kind of designated like kayak trails. I mean, there's like full trees that are growing up in the middle of the river right there, and you can kind of kayak between them. It's likely you might get stuck on a rock. So it's good to not be alone and be with someone else. But the kayak trip that I took in that section, our instructor fell out of the kayak and went into the water. So it was like, okay, if that's the worst that happens, fine. When your instructor falls in, then if you fall in, there's no problem. But yeah, people are scared of the LA River because they don't understand it. They don't know about it. They haven't experienced it. They don't even know that there are parts that aren't concrete at the bottom. They think, well, where'd you get a kayak? Just this little channel.
Yeah, I think I had heard something about that, and I thought, okay, I drive over bridges over that all the time, and all I see is dead birds floating out to sea. And but then I saw a program, I think it was KCET actually, that featured some areas that are really beautiful. And
the living birds are incredible. I mean, you'll see these great blue herons, the snowy egrets, the great white egrets. I mean, all these like shorebirds, and that's always a good measure of like the health of a body of water, because the birds won't come if it's toxic, right? And that's like the reputation that the LA River has had, is that like, ew, why would you want to go in there? It's toxic. And, mostly it's just like storm runoff. It's like when it rains, the water level's really high because everything's been channelized to like run through that river and then out into the ocean. So, but it feels like kind of a shame that, they had to build, this concrete canal essentially because of these horrible floods that happened in the 30s, probably is not a danger right now, given the amount of rainfall that we get. So there has been a lot of talk about revitalizing the LA River and trying to bring more of this like natural landscape and soft bottom parts. But right now at Sepulveda Basin near the dam, you can take off your shoes and just walk right in to squish your toes in the mud. And that is far more adventurous than a lot of Angelinos are willing to go.
But it's there if they want it.
It is there. And I know that with COVID last year, there were some restrictions on LA River recreation. I think that the concessionaires were not allowed to operate, but that if you had your own watercraft, you could go. So if anybody has a kayak already or could rent one, it's worth the adventure, and it's right there. I mean, it's so close. Talk about like adventure in your backyard. That's a prime example of it.
Yeah.
The other body of water that people are scared of, probably more so than the LA River, is the Salton Sea.
And I think rightfully so, I'll just say.
Now, why do you think so, Ken? Like, what's your impression of it?
We had a member who actually went out kayaking. They were searching for something. I guess an aircraft. I guess an aircraft went down in the Salton Sea. And
I think the Navy sunk some things in the sea as well, just to like surplus whatever to get rid of it.
And so he was out looking for it, and somewhere in the adventure, he got a mouthful of the water, and he said even a Slurpee wouldn't get rid of the.
Well, I wouldn't want to drink it.
Yes, so.
It's very salty. I mean, so I went kayaking, and that was just through like the state recreation area that's on the eastern shore of it. So they take you out on the water. I mean, one thing you don't realize is like when the wind picks up, like there's also rapids out on the Salton Sea. So this like sort of, not connected to any rivers or anything, but the water can get very choppy. And, maybe I wouldn't go swimming in it because you don't want that much salt, to like permeate your body. Yeah. But as you're paddling, of course, it splashes up on you. And even just to look like at my hand where I had been holding the paddle, just crusted with salt.
Oh, salt crystals. Wow.
Completely crystallized. Yes. But, a lot of people, think, again, they use this word toxic, and mostly it's just that salt content that causes an issue because, every year there's an algae overgrowth. It causes a fish die off. So you might find some dead fish and fish bones and barnacles and all kinds of stuff on the shore. And birds die as a result of it. And of course, now the Salton Sea has like receded so much in the last 10 years. I mean, the level is tremendously low because they stopped doing all this like irrigation runoff. I mean, it's a very agricultural area in Imperial County. And the level was kept pretty high for many decades. It didn't just evaporate because of all this like irrigation runoff. And once they stopped directing, I don't know where the water's going now, but it's not going in the sea. And the sea's beach has like really grown. So I don't even know. I mean, I wouldn't even know how to go kayaking on the Salton Sea now. Although people do take boats out there, even just like inflatable rafts and stuff. And people fish. Yeah. People eat the tilapia. And they survive. But I think that whole area is really fascinating because, that was an ancient lake bed. It's a natural depression in the earth. The San Andreas Fault runs right past it. So very often you hear about these swarms of earthquakes. Hundreds of earthquakes can happen in, very short periods of time down there. And, a lot of artists, as they're wont to do, have kind of taken over. Yes. Slab City, which is the old Navy base where it's literally just concrete slabs. And people have kind of, it's not really maintained. It's not maintained by the county. There's no law enforcement there. It's sort of a self-governing society that's off the grid. And the East Jesus community has become pretty renowned for its, assemblage art and that sort of thing. And a lot of artists have moved into Bombay Beach and set up experiential art. There's the Bombay Beach Opera House and the Bombay Beach Drive-In, and there's some art pieces that actually get installed out in the sea. There's a swing that you have to go in the water to get your picture taken on the swing. So it's a little bit of a challenge.
So it's still a tourist draw, but for completely different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, if you know the history of the Salton Sea, used to be this, the Riviera of Southern California and destination for boat races. And of course, the salinity was very high then too. So the buoyancy is like something you've never experienced before. But I didn't feel like the Salton Sea experience was complete until I actually got on the water. And that's pretty emblematic of my sense of adventure. It's like, why I don't like to play, in present day, I don't like to play video games because I'd rather just do the things that are in the game.
Sure.
Like, why do virtual reality? Like, I don't get it.
How about
Like, I'll just
actual reality?
yeah, if I want to shoot a gun, like, let me just go to like a shooting range and shoot a gun.
Yeah.
Not like fake shoot a gun. So
Okay. And you hit Mono Lake?
oh yeah, so Mono Lake, another, underdog body of water. I mean, it looks like another planet. It has these crazy tufa formations, as a result of the minerality of the, that's coming up through the earth combined with cold water. And then it creates these formations. So I think a lot of people do go to Mono Lake just to take pictures because it looks so crazy. But one of the opportunities that there are, again, in normal times is to take a canoe trip out there. So that was the same exact experience. Like, why do I want to stay on the shore of this body of water when I can actually like be in the middle of it? And our canoe guide, scooped up a jar full of brine shrimp. So we're not just looking at them, swimming in this salty water, but actually could see it like with the sun shining through their translucent, tissues. So, and Mono Lake is quite fascinating because there's a lot of like volcanic activity up there as well.
Sure.
There's actually like a plugged volcano that you can like hike around right above Mono Lake. And, very rich Native American history there. Mono are the actual flies that populate the shore. It's just like full of flies.
Yes.
And the Native Americans used to eat them. So, yeah, for me, it's like, I don't want to see something from afar. If I can get on the water, get in the water, drive the car, ride the train, whatever it is I can do. I want to get my hands dirty. I want to, experience every sense, not just visual, but I want to feel it, even if it's kind of gross, like at the aquarium. I want to put my hand in all the touch tanks, right? I want to poke the jellyfish and see what happens.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think of an adventure and sometimes they'll say, why would you go there? And sometimes it's something you just can't explain to them. But if they were to do it themselves, they would understand.
Sometimes I don't know what my own motivation is. I just get a bug in my head. And, a lot of my inspiration for travels has come from Atlas Obscura's website. I was a huge fan of that website when it first came out. And, I still have this kind of like almost OCD, little bit obsessive way of like checking off the boxes. So when they add a new location to the site, I've like got to, if I haven't been there already, I have to go there. I have to be able to click that button and say, I've been there. and those are a lot of the, obscure, off the beaten path, the path less taken kinds of destinations. So, and there's so many more on my list. It's kind of hard now with travel being restricted, either just in terms of like, I have to be able to drive there and not fly there, or it has to be within this like, 120-mile limit that they have set right now. I do find that there's, plenty to keep me entertained. I mean, I cannot imagine all these people who are like baking bread.
Yeah.
Because there's just so many things I want to see and places I want to go. And maybe, in the last several months, it means a little bit more like go to the food stand that scares me. Okie Dog in West Hollywood on Fairfax, which has they're named, the eponymous Okie Dog dish, which is a hot dog wrapped in a tortilla with cheese, chili, and pastrami and maybe some other stuff. It's terrifying, but it's really delicious.
That sounds worth the risk.
Yeah, it was worth the risk. Right, exactly. So, I think a lot of people aren't sure, what's going to be worth the risk. There is a calculated risk to everything. I think the risk is greater of me not to experience something and then like wonder what would have happened. I'd rather, there are these tall ships in San Pedro that you can, go on like, excursions. And I went on one of these tall ships on a boat ride, and I ended up like crashing somebody's like pirate themed birthday party. And I was like one of maybe 3 people who were not part of that birthday party because I'd like bought a ticket and they like didn't tell me that they had like sold it as a private.
Stand out a little.
So people are like, "Oh, who do you know?" And I'm like, "I'm here to take pictures." And then the boat ended up getting stranded because the engine died, and then another boat had to come and save us. And it was just like I missed out on a puppet show I had tickets for that night. At the time I was really miserable, but in retrospect, I'm very grateful that I got to experience it, and it's still a very historic, vessel. And now I know I never have to do it again.
Check that one off.
Yeah. Rather than, wondering what would have happened had I gone, or, oh, I should have tried that. Or, geez, all these places I never got to go before they closed, or they get torn down. And just that, it breaks my heart too much to have that, oh, I missed it before it went away. So I'm still like scrambling to get everything before my time runs out.
Well, outstanding attitude. It's very inspirational to people.
Makes me
I hope
a little
it is.
crazy. But I don't have a TV. You know what? I don't binge watch shows, and I don't have children. So I have a lot of autonomy, and I have a work schedule that's very flexible. And I'm very grateful that a lot of the adventures I do go on, I can turn into content, either if only for my own blog, but also maybe for some of the partners that I write for. And I'd love to share these experiences with other people, because a lot of people maybe have the curiosity or the desire, but they don't have the means. They don't have the time, the money, just the ability, the mobility. So I'm happy to let them, take them along in the ride in the cockpit or whatever.
Okay. I would like to take a few minutes. I think we have some time. Maybe we can cap it off with some cute animals.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
And then I think we probably have some questions maybe in the chat. So let's look at a few animals, and then which is always a winning topic, and then we can take some questions if that's all right.
So there is a canine conservation center, and yes, like foxes are canids, so they're related to dogs. In the town of Santa Isabel, which is like eastern San Diego County. And you can do, this is something that is open to anyone. If you can make a reservation, buy your ticket. It's nothing special that I discovered, but the backstory is quite fascinating. So there is this Russian experiment to domesticate foxes for the fur trade to make them less likely to like bite their masters. Oh. So, but this is an experiment that has been like, it's lost its funding. So there are all these foxes that have been bred, and they're not allowed, I forget what the regulation is that means they're not allowed to go into the fur trade, but they're no longer being like raised to be friendly towards humans on like a genetic level. Like that's actually, they're, selectively breeding certain foxes based on like their level of friendliness and their, level of like comfort with humans. So this place in San Diego County is now rescuing these foxes that are like friendly foxes.
So can you like go out and get a fox pet?
Well, part of their experience is to try to explain to people why a fox is still a wild animal, and why you wouldn't necessarily want to have one as a pet. They're smelly, they have these like musk glands that they smell very foxy. And, they get into things in ways that, your typical cats and dogs don't. It's tough because they're telling you this. You don't want a fox as a pet. You don't want a fox as a pet. But then you're holding one. You're like, I want a fox as a pet. They're so soft and they're so cute and they're really smart. So that fox encounter, I think that's a little bit under the radar, but I think they've only been around for maybe like 3 years or something.
Okay.
When I went like 2 years ago, they were still pretty new. And I had become a little bit obsessed, particularly with red foxes, because I don't think he's there anymore. But when I went to Chernobyl with Atlas Obscura, the company town for the nuclear plant is called Pripyat, and there's a resident wild fox that has become somewhat of an internet sensation and tourist attraction. So people bring sandwich fixings and little snacks and stuff for this fox named Simon. And for me, I would have spent all day with Simon. I didn't even need to go into like the abandoned schools or whatever. I was just fascinated with this like Chernobyl fox who had survived like the nuclear levels of the red forest. And so anyway, when I had the chance to like hold a red fox, of my own, because you can't touch the radioactive fox in Chernobyl.
So I did miss that point when I was introducing you. Sandi is also a fair traveler outside of the U.S. She's not just Southern California. So you've been to Chernobyl?
Yes.
And Cuba?
Just Havana. I'd love to do more of Cuba. Really would love to go back and do more exploration of like neon, because they're bringing a lot of the historic neon back. In 2008, I spent like 10 days in Morocco, all over, in and out of Casablanca, but in, the desert, very remote areas, the oases, the capital, Rabat, obviously Marrakesh and Fez. And then in 2010, I went to Tunisia, and I did that by myself. I was on a tour group, but everybody on this like bus tour was like an older, like retired British person. And then I was like the only like young single person, which is great. Honestly, it was great. Everybody treated me like a princess. All of the couples on the tour kind of, made sure I was okay. And, I've never had a problem finding somebody to like eat at the dinner table with or whatever. Sure. But I chose Morocco and Tunisia because I had studied French for 5 years. So and that's the only other language I have any really significant familiarity with. So even though I've not spent any time in France, but the French protectorates, I'm down. And I was in Budapest visiting friends, 15 years ago, and spent a semester in London in college. Went to Ireland while I was there. So definitely some international stuff. A lot of domestic travel, just even from work. Had to go to Florida many times, Atlanta, Minnesota, sure. Detroit, all over Vegas. All
righty. Would you like to take some questions?
Yeah, let's do questions.
All right.
If we have any. Otherwise, we'll talk about more cute animals.
You get Carol Merrill over here with let's see. Okay. Assuming cost, physical skill, and locale were no object, what's at the top of your bucket list to do? That's from Roya.
Oh, from Roya. Okay. Okay. Cost and physical skill. I'd really love to do scuba diving, which I've never done before. I would like to do more underwater things because I like to go places and look at stuff. So, particularly like shipwreck diving. Super fascinated with the shipwrecks that are around Staten Island in New York. And also in the Great Lakes, there's a whole bunch of shipwrecks there. So I have been daunted by my physical capacity to be able to do that. I've never been any kind of scuba diving before. But that is pretty high on my list as a pie in the sky kind of thing.
Well, when you're ready for Rex, we'll hook you up.
Oh yeah. Oh, I love it.
Okay.
I don't even need to find treasure. You know, just the wreck itself is like the treasure for me.
Yes. So Alec is asking, do the C-bands work for air sickness as well?
Yes, they do. Yes. And roller coasters. So I mostly get like car sick.
Yeah.
And I'll have to say that I haven't been in a helicopter with the C-bands, so I don't know how that would be, because I tend to get quite sick in helicopters. But yeah, pretty much any form of motion sickness, those C-bands are incredible. You have to wear both of them.
Yeah.
And you have to get it in the right spot, but they tell you how to do that. You know, you typically have like 3 lines on your wrist and it matches up with 3 fingers. And then the spot is right below that 3rd line. So yeah, okay. I'm not into a lot of like hooey stuff. You know, you know, this is obviously derived from like Eastern medicine, and I haven't used acupressure for anything else in my life, but man, those C-bands work.
It works. It works.
Yeah.
Okay. So Paul asks, as an avid travel photographer, how do you both enjoy the moment and capture it for documentary purposes?
Yeah, I think that's important, because sometimes I do want to just like take it in. And when I've done that later, I'm sad I don't have the photos. So I do feel like it's a trade-off. It's a sacrifice. Sometimes for me, that means just doing it again. Just first time, do it, record it. And then second time, do it for fun. You know, if that's possible. Sometimes it's so expensive or so remote or whatever, it's not possible. I am very aware of it. I have a mindfulness about really enjoying what I'm doing. And I've kind of stopped taking pictures at like concerts, because I can't really get into it if I'm trying to like, you know, mess with the lighting and stuff on my camera. So, but I also like don't carry a tripod, and I don't have interchangeable lenses. I have a very simple camera setup, and I'm often just like, boom, like guerrilla shooting, just like snapping, setting up a little bit, but really not much, because I want to stay on the move. I'm shooting photos out my car window or through the windshield. Don't tell the police.
It doesn't show, so.
So, you know, like I shot a video through Titus Canyon, and my friend was like, "Oh, what did you use to mount your camera on?" And I was like, "Mount." Yeah. What are you talking about? But I have a good ability to, you know, to multitask. And I actually am more focused when I have more things to do. So, but that's a great question. And I would advise anyone that if taking pictures is, you know, sabotaging their own enjoyment of an experience, to just enjoy it and let your memories speak for themselves.
Because no one's going to look at the pictures when you're dead anyway, right?
Oh, I was just thinking about that. I was like, I need to find a library to like bequeath my photo collection to. Because someday people are going to want to know what this place looked like in the year, you know, 2011 or whatever. If I live long enough. Okay. And don't, you know, go off-roading too much in like, you know, subcompact vehicles. Yes.
Okay. Joe Hollywood is asking,
hi, Joe.
What has been your most favorite mode of travel experience so far?
I really love trains, even though I'm not driving them. So it surprises me to say that, but yeah, I love trains, and maybe because I don't have to navigate. I do find navigating to be a major distraction. Because I love operating a car, but I hate that fear that I'm going to get lost or that I have to figure out where I'm supposed to be. Sure. Whereas in a train, you're in this massive piece of machinery. And there's the rumble of the rails, and there's the, chugga, 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 the sounds, the whistles, the bells, the feeling of walking up and down the passenger car aisles, swaying. It's just such a full body experience. And, I would say one of the other watershed moments in my adventuring has been when I took the train from Campo, California to Tecate. So they used to have a train that went over the border through a tunnel. Service is suspended right now because there was some damage to the tunnel and there were some border, patrol issues, and it's probably going to come back at some point. But that was just like, man, this is one of the best days of my life to ride this train through the tunnel to Mexico. It just sort of blew my mind that was possible.
Yeah, it is a very different experience. Okay, I think that covers the questions.
Awesome.
Sandi, it's been great having you. Really appreciate you coming on my premiere night. So thanks for helping me get through it.
Oh, Ken, I really value your friendship and I appreciate your support as well. I remember when I was presenting about Atlas Obscura at a travel conference, and you came and you were part of the audience. I really appreciated that.
That was fun.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be able to see each other in person at future, maybe tiki nights at the Adventurers Club, or
yes,
more
we're working on
club.
that.
Yeah.
As soon as they let us know when we can have a life again, that's going to be one of our first events. So we'd love to have you there.
Well, I'm absolutely honored that, my little world of crazy adventures was interesting enough to be able to get a slot on your live stream. So I'm just tickled pink to be here.
Well, I personally find what you do very inspiring, and I hope other people who are watching have the same feeling and go out and try something new this week.
Yeah.
Do something this weekend.
Just be safe. Yes. Wear a mask.
So if you guys enjoyed this tonight, please be sure to follow our website, adventurersclub.org. Tune into our YouTube channel and subscribe. And you can get content like this every week, for better or worse. And let us be a part of your lives. Let us entertain you. Thank you very much.